Should be live. We're going to do a quick live stream today. Did not have a video yesterday. Sorry, did not have one. I spent most of my waking time yesterday in various airports across America trying to get back home. Was stuck for 18 hours on my flight back from a trip that I had to go to Virginia Beach. So there was no video yesterday. Sorry about that, which then also threw off the schedule for today a little to where we're doing a live stream today. But it's going to be hopefully a good live stream and try to get folks caught up on what we're pursuing when it comes to research on Ethereum's current status with proof of stake. Where's it at? You know, from the development teams that are working on it, from Ethereum 1.0 clients to Ethereum 2.0 clients. Where do we get this kind of information that will be coming out as part of this kind of series around Ethereum proof of stake, which will cover up and down the stack from technical to deployment plans to how does it impact you as a user on both sides of it. And then we'll get into some of the dynamics when it comes to like if you're mining it, you know, where do you go? And that leads into like the mining model and all that kind of fun stuff. But I have a whole bunch of other questions that I'm going to try to get through with you guys today that we're looking into and seeing if we can get some participation from some of the Ethereum 2.0 community or folks like Hatsu, or, you know, just get some exposure to some of the questions I have from a mechanical and a technical standpoint. And then it'll open up some of the things that I'm concerned in from a risk standpoint as an Ethereum holder. As an Ethereum holder myself, as a miner from Ethereum holder that will be moving in and possibly having a validation node, I got questions, my dudes, and I imagine you guys do too. It covers a lot of different ranges from the potential decentralization of Ethereum 2.0 and trying to keep it democratized and distributed and allow multiple people in this space to participate while trying to meet some of those other goals that they're trying to do. And then how does that look from just an overall, how does proof of stake, you know, doing a crawl, walk, run of what the differences between something like a proof of work system is versus a proof of stake system, and then the various different types of proof of stake systems that are out there. There are a lot of different proof of stake systems out there. There's distributed proof of stake. There's what Casper FFG, which is what Ethereum's trying to do. There's what Solana had, what Cardano has. There's different types of proof of stake. So having, I think, a good dedicated video of the different types of systems of how those validators work, who can be a participant, how do you normally would go about setting up a validator, that sort of thing. I think just to give people some awareness on the proof of stake side. And then we can get into the, I would call it more the cultural understanding and the difference in ideology between proof of stake and proof of work. I haven't seen any really good videos that start to try to tackle the real risk when you start talking the move to something like proof of stake versus proof of work, down to the fundamentals of how the security architecture works and the binding and bond that you have in that relationship with the network. I think that it is a critical discussion to have. There's some of its philosophy. It usually bubbles up to just the basics of like, well, it uses less electricity, so it must be better. But it doesn't get through what I would call almost a SWOT analysis of the differences between the networks and what you're trading off for when you're going to something like proof of stake. And then what is it going to try to prove and make it a lot more easier for people, consume less energy, some of the other advantages, disadvantages, that sort of thing. So having just a hit list to know what you're getting into with something on one of the proof of stake networks and what you're accepting, you're taking probably functionality and speed at the cost of, you know, the decentralization, that sort of thing. So just if there was like a one punch sheet that was created that showed the differences between these things and are not subjective, like actual mechanical, like factual stuff. And it's trying to be very open on the statements of making sure that it is a mechanical, like factual statement. Less energy is consumed with proof of stake, from an individual participant versus an individual participant, you could probably say yes. If I had a GPU mining rig, it's going to be using less energy. As a totality, I don't know. Like, what kind of footprint do you consider that? Do you consider the fact that a lot of proof of stake nodes are probably going to end up on the data centers and cloud operations? And those use a lot of energy too. And they're a multi-tenant environment, meaning they have to exist because there's other people that use other things on clouds. But if you're just giving them more reason to build out more infrastructure, there's still a power footprint there that is being driven because people are trying to make proof of stake nodes. So again, that gets into the kind of nuance of the conversation, but having an understanding, one for one, likeness for likeness, one vote for one vote on the ability to participate or not, we can keep it at that kind of level too. Just want to have a good conversation about that. There are also all kinds of other things I have questions with that I wrote up a list, and I actually sent this over to Hatsu, and I'm trying to get, I think we could have a very good conversation. I'm very open to having my opinion changed on some stuff. And I think I can articulate it in a way that hopefully will help move the conversation forward when it comes to people's understanding of this space, when it comes to the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. But there's just a whole bunch of questions that somebody like Hatsu's not going to be able to answer some of these things because it has to do with like timelines and schedules. That's going to be the folks working on Ethereum development. And all of us on the sidelines can just speculate on that based on past history or based on just the order of operations that it takes to get something to a production level, or production ready, as I would call it, to where then you could start to test it and all those kind of things. But breaking down videos that break down that process of what like the Ethereum team is doing, both from even understanding that the Ethereum 1.0 technical folks that work on clients, which is your ability to interact with the network, node support, that sort of stuff, are working on some components. And then the ETH2 team are working on some components, and kind of what's left and remaining for them to get to the merge. So one of the big questions right now is like, when's the merge come up? There was a notional update that it was like trying to aim for December. What are the steps? I look at it like not from developers telling me when a date is supposed to be hit. I want to look at it from what do they have remaining to get it to a production ready status to where they can start testing, because that's going to give us the best indicator of when the timeline really is, right? So when they've deployed code, they're ready to go. Now it's the proof point standpoint. It's can it pass all the tests? Does it go through a series of use cases that prove out that the transition will work fine? What are some of those risks that are associated with that? When they get to that point, then we can start talking dates of when all the expectations are going to occur for, the merge to happen. And obviously, as a miner, as people that are also miners want to know when this is going to occur so they can make sure that they adjust accordingly. In addition, people that are sitting on the sidelines, a lot of folks, I had that video the other day that was talking to why do people mine versus when people buy the coin. And they're looking at the different platform here, and they're weighing the risk of like getting in now to try to do mining. There's other things to mine. It all comes back down to proof of work. How long is it going to be? There's a lot of things to mine, but is it worth the financial risk now? If they're wanting to get exposure to the crypto space, there's multiple ways to get exposure to the crypto space. You can mine, you can buy coins directly. You can create some kind of incentive to where you're getting paid for your services that you do every day, and you just receive it in that way. So now you're getting it kind of like a service pay. There's not as many airdrops anymore. There's a few airdrops every once in a while that you can get, but how do people participate or not? And should they get in there if something's moving to proof of stake, and what does that mean? Another key big thing is around the MEV. So miner extracted value, which really comes down into, there's a series of things that happen in a dark forest. So any kind of transaction memory queue that is transparent, people that have the opportunity to reorder and sort those things for the most efficiency possible, and or have a front run opportunity there, that value that's now extracted by said pool. I have all kinds of questions. I know that a lot of the MEV activity will not stop. It will continue on when it comes into proof of stake. There's a huge difference, though, when you go from something like proof of work, where proof of work is purely a random chance based on your tickets that you're submitting out there, essentially. So the more hash rate you have, the more opportunity you have to win a block. If you are in a pool and that pool is configured correctly to extract a maximum MEV, then the participants that are going to that pool will have a larger supply of yield predicated on their hash rate. So it's a numerator and denominator game. The more numerator that you have, you're going to have more yield potential from that pool, and then you're paid out. MEV is just part of that process organically now that a lot of these pools now are supplying the maximum amount of MEV within that network. With proof of stake, it switches from a random event to a random selected and deterministic model. So where there is quote unquote some randomness, but if you are an individual validator, you over a certain epoch, which is a time frame of events, essentially, you are randomly selected. Right now is the way it's set up. So you would have that entire revenue opportunity on the extra fee extraction on top of the drip that goes across to everybody. So a lot of people aren't tracking the fact that if you are a proof of stake node participant, a validator, everybody gets a stake. So versus on proof of work, a very fundamental difference. Proof of work, it's random chance, bro. If like you went out there and solo mined, you could mine for years and never get anything. You're just paying for power and hoping for a chance. That's why people go to pools, because pools have a statistical advantage because of size to win some blocks, and then everybody shares yield. Then you're getting paid proportionally to the pool's luck percentage of winning those blocks, and it's distributed. And proof of stake, the validator setup is saying if you're locking in a stake, you are going to get paid no matter what. You're going to get paid. It's just a very micro amount, and I call it a drip. It's just a drip payment across to everybody. So everybody that's a validator node all gets paid. Very small amount. And then you can control the inflation rate because it's fixed, and you have this guarantee that everybody's getting paid. That's a node, and there's an annual percentage rate that you get. And your real X factor is if you are selected to be able to validate the next block on that node, and then you would get that fee extraction also. So obviously this is part of the motive of why people that have validating nodes cannot wait for proof of stake to occur, because then they will have that also now random chance to be able to mint that block and be able to do MEV extraction themselves, thereby transitioning it over to proof of stake. The issue is now you're in a deterministic system, and it's a lot more finite. So there's a lot less potential validators than the potential decentralized participant in proof of work. Because in proof of work, your barrier to entry is your access to hardware. So if you have access to a GPU, you can participate. You can just go, you can watch this video right now, watch a couple of the other videos I have, and some of the other folks out there that are making videos. And literally in a couple hours, you could be participating on the Ethereum network, and you will be earning Ethereum rewards. You'll be able to be a participant and be able to get immediate participation. So that by just barrier to entry gives you entering that access in there. The current proof of stake piece, that there are some pools that are set up to where they will own the nodes, and then they will create a derivative layer on top, and then you can give them money, and then they'll give you a share of that. And that's more of a derivative kind of model. You could also call it a fractional ownership. I think Rocket Pool is one of them that's doing it. I have not looked into it. It is on my list to understand the financial mindset, like how that structure works. I don't see how that functionally works. I understand how it could functionally work. I don't understand mechanically how they're going to make the accounting of that correct, because they're going to only be able to allow so many people to do it. Otherwise, you're diluting anybody else that joins that pool, if that makes sense. And maybe that's the way they do it. But so fractional ownership, if you, I've seen people try to explain it as a fractional ownership. Well, the way I look at a fractional ownership is there's slots, and slots mean if you don't want to have, or you don't have the capital to buy a full proof of stake node. Right now, proof of stake is 32 Ethereum. And if you are going to get into a fractional ownership deal, that means you own one of 32. So that means that the pools would have to continuously add nodes because they're essentially selling the slots out. You own 1/32 of a node and you get 1/32 of the output of said node. Then you have a series of nodes, and let's say they all sell. And now any revenue that's brought in across all those, they could then share that like a pool, and whatever the totality of the take, as it were, the drip plus any kind of transactions that they were selected to mint a block, and they would gain the MEV, they would then distribute that back out like any other pool. The difference is, I don't know how that works mechanically and from taxes and all that kind of stuff for people of how they will create that. Because by definition, you're effectively creating it and treating it like a security, because you're going to have to attribute ownership in some way. And if they do that mechanizedly, where they create a mechanism around it, is that through a sub token? Is that right now it's considered through a sub token, which I think they call like ETH, I think is what they call it, like staked Ethereum. So it's actually a separate mechanical token. Well, now you're creating, this separate thing that should be tied to its base value, but they're like, unless they open up that ledger to be transparent, like who knows, right? You're not really, these are questions I have, and maybe Rocket Pool would be able to do something with us and explain it. But I think that kind of transparency is what's needed to understand, like in mining and in pools, there is transparency. You can go there, you can see how many miners there are. You can see what the total pool has. That's broadcasted on third-party websites to show you their penetration and total market size. It's a lot more cleaner snap of the line. And how will that work in proof of stake? Now, some of these things might be not known. And as a potential proof of stake participant, these are things that I would like to know before I go through. So that's one of the items on our punch list, is to find out and be able to snap a line to what that is. I think it's a very valuable piece to know and be able to communicate to people. And anybody that is in the audience or anybody that has this kind of information, let's, get this out there. Share this video after we're done. And let's see if we can get somebody like Hatsu or Tim Binko or Vitalik. I'll have a conversation with Vitalik if he knows that, and have like some real discussion. I think it's valuable information for people, especially if anybody's going to invest in this space. They need to know that kind of stuff. And it shouldn't be behind a paywall or anything like that. There's a whole other series of questions. And I mean, we're already about 18 minutes in. I want to try to do a half-hour video on this and then get you guys out, actually produce content, has some graphics, starts to explain some of these points a little more valid. Part of that research that I'm doing with this isn't to just also communicate and educate you guys as we're learning it too, is to give you the sources where you can do your own research on it and have a basic understanding, a mock-up how it is, and also correct things. Like if I'm not communicating it correctly, or it is incorrect of my interpretation of what's written, and they're like, no, that's not what we meant, you misunderstood that, this is the way it works. Perfectly okay on that kind of stuff. The open to understand some of that stuff. But like there are, some of the things that I'm looking at trying to produce for you guys is design effectively what's considered an OV1. It's an operational view, the first layer. What's the components look like in that kind of setup, especially in the pool side. The pool side is going to be what's really interesting, I think, to a lot of participants, because the barrier entry issue that I'm talking about. If you don't have $150,000 or $100,000 or $3,200 right now to go on and invest to be a participant, that can't be your barrier entry on, if you expect this thing to be not completely centralized or federated, right? You need to have structure around the ability to have people to be able to participate at a lower cost of entry. And that might be done by pools. Pools, that's part of that could be the the threshold to have people to be able to participate in the security of your network. So once we learn more about that, we'll be able to communicate that with you guys. Another piece of that is understanding. It would be very interesting to see Ethereum Foundation's long-term goal, if they still hold to the current line right now on the mantra that they want to reduce inflation over time. And if that is the case, they're doing it right now with the EIP 1559. There's going to be fee burns. There is parts and times that Ethereum does become deflationary. How does that look now that the drip rate is so much lower and transaction fees stay high and there's going to be the burn? Is the incentive motive and profit motive on price discovery aligned correctly to move Ethereum to the next level? Or if it's all about just price discovery right now on Ethereum's token, like the motives aren't set up correctly, meaning why would the developers ever have the motive to do certain things any faster? Because if now the transition moves to proof of stake and there's no way to exit those positions on those proof of stake nodes, and there's only a way to put more into it, you're locking more and more and more ETH up, then it's going to put a supply crunch on there. It's going to technically drive price. What is the motive that would prevent, or why the motives to like unlock it to where people could now take ETH out are not aligned anymore? So what's the risk in that, right? Of like, oh, it's going to slip 6 months, keep locking up ETH, my dudes. Like, I don't know, man. Like at some point, like you could build derivative networks that sit outside of that. And then you could take essentially loan shark positions against your thing saying, hey, here's my keys. I have money. I can't move, but I need money now. So will you let me have some money and I'll give you a contract that says that you own now part of my node. And now you only have that layer on top to facilitate the ability to move money in and out of ETH, but it never leaves Beacon, right? Like I got real questions there. Like how can a developer or how can anybody that's around that system influencing that, priority list, say, hey, ZK, we went to merge. Magically ZK rollups become the top priority. Like we don't need a withdrawal. Go to ZK rollups. So make ETH usable more. Keep locking your ETH up. Like that's the questions I got. This is part of the reason why I never have done a 32 ETH node yet, because I'm got questions and it's nothing against them. I'm a pro ETH person. I've always been a pro ETH person. I've had a lot of like love-hate relationship on some of the decision-making for sure. But I mean, these are just questions that should be at least explored. I don't think anybody in the Ethereum Foundation, any of the core developers, I don't think anybody can answer it. I think it's more of a community discussion. I think it's like, hey, what's a priority list here? And then how do we get there? It's more of a scrum of scrums type of thing, not so much one monolithic, person that's going to say this is the way it is. I think that that's not healthy for anybody to go that route. But having a discussion to say, hey, what's the priority and are the motives messed up? It is what it is. So just real talk today from you guys. We're 23 minutes in. I only got through like a quarter of my list. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. I got questions, man. Hopefully we can get somebody that has some good insight to where they're at, how they're tracking, and can answer some of these pool questions and ideas. Gallo says ETH devs hate miners. I think there's a misunderstanding of mining. I think there's some baked hatred because there's heartstrings pulled when it comes to the power consumption, and they're attributing that thing to like this negative connotation to mining, not understanding that mining is your security structure. And if you think you're paying too much for security, right there, you've already lost the understanding of how things work, in my opinion. Like the second you think like I'm paying too much for security, it will tell ETC that, tell any of these other coins that did not have protections on their network in any way when they thought that they had a large enough network. you know, as some wise people would say, I got a number for you to call to somebody that's going to tell you can never have enough security on a crypto network. Jim D says, listening to your brain work on these is super interesting. Hey, thanks, man. I have a process oriented brain on this kind of stuff, right? I mean, a lot of my career and my day to day work and job, and as I went through life with various careers with some larger companies, it was around process management. I mean, my skill sets around this exact subject: black belt Six Sigma, green belt Six Sigma, supply chain optimization. That's my expertise outside of the crypto stuff. So when I look at things and application development wrapped in all that. So when I'm looking at workflow, I'm looking at optimization of stuff all the time. So that's, I break things down like that. That's the way I function. Knowing is half the battle. It is, my dude. Will you be able to cover the timeline for 2.0? This is part of what we're trying to do. So in the first video that we have with this, we're going to have a proof of work, proof of stake, kind of what's the difference, quad chart, like just a bottom line up front for people. And it done in a way that is looking at like kind of a newbie view on this subject. Like if you could go in not knowing anything, that's going to be that first video. Like, you know, what are the big things with proof of work? What are the big things with proof of stake? What are they claiming on both sides? What's the reality so far, history, that sort of thing. And then what is the road to 2.0 from my perspective related to the way development works and then working backwards from a release schedule. Like if something's ready for production ready in the EIP process, they will get it to a ready status and then they'll deploy the smart contract to various test nets. And then there's going to be a series of testing. When they get to that stage, then we'll have a much more accurate timeline that then we can communicate to folks. But getting to that and getting maybe some ETH devs and seeing where they're at, I think would be it. Lean Six Sigma got auto manufacturers with no supply now. Hey, just because you have a good process, your inputs still need to function. And if those inputs change, then you're just going to be on a supply crunch. So Lean Six Sigma got you to the point of being able to function at a high rate, but you still need inputs. If you don't control and you don't own the entire process, it is what it is. Oh yeah, I was out today doing a whole bunch of different stuff. I had a couple meetings today, so I was still dressed up. So we just went straight live. Yep. I've had mainly business. My education background's business, so I actually have a business degree. So love the live stream. All right, guys, we're right at 28 minutes. We're gonna wrap this up right now, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Make sure you're like and subscribe and share this. We'll get some stuff out to you guys, and we'll catch